Today we have a wonderful speaker, Ashley Crowder from VNTANA, who is the CEO and co-founder. And VNTANA is a 3D content management company. So with a warm welcome, please welcome Ashley to the stage.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Yeah, I've worked in the 3D AR/VR space for about 15 years, so super excited about the progress we've made and just like how big this conference has gotten over the years, and just the adoption of using 3D and digital twins everywhere. So today, I'm hoping to go through some non-obvious use cases of digital twins and 3D models. As you know, our speaker mentioned, we're a 3D content management system. We have tens of thousands of 3D models from brands from Hugo Boss to Kohler. So we end up seeing some really interesting use cases and benefits of 3D and digital twins that I really didn't think of before. So first are the evergreen usage rights of a 3D model and digital twins. So if you own that asset as a company, and you should, whether you're hiring a vendor to create it or you're creating in-house, you should make sure you own that wholly because you can use it throughout your organization. So, initially, of course, it's the highest level asset. You can create all different types of content from that 3D asset, whether it's 2D renders, videos, virtual scenes, adding it 3D to your e-commerce platform. But you also can easily change that in the future. We worked with a sporting goods company who manufactures treadmills. Think about how painful it is to go ship a treadmill and shoot that if the only thing that changed in 2 years was the logo, right? But you can actually have that 3D model, quickly update it, and use it later. Or if you're someone like IKEA and creating a new kitchen scene, maybe you have a chair that you launched in 2022, but you need a chair in the background of the scene, you can reuse that 3D asset. So if you have set up your organization with a scalable 3D infrastructure and that everybody has access to and can grab that asset, you can actually reuse it throughout years and years later. So when you think about the cost of the investment to create that initial 3D asset, and amortize that over all the different use cases, that cost is minimal compared to the value that you can get from it, as long as your organization is set up correctly. Second is waste reduction. And this is across the entire product lifecycle. So a lot of people think about replacing physical samples. And yes, that is a huge potential for waste reduction, but this happens in a few different points along the value chain of a product. So first is in that design and manufacturing and consumer product testing phase. So we have seen brands use 3D models for consumer product testing. Compared to physical samples, you can test an insanely higher number of variations in products because it's virtual. You can test with way more people, and you're really not restricted by geography and shipping. And then of course, the turnaround time is way, way faster. So at the end of the day, you're gonna be manufacturing just better products because you're gonna have more consumer input for that. Not to mention, the carbon waste of shipping everywhere and actually manufacturing those samples. And plus, you're gonna have huge cost savings in not having to manufacture those dyes and then change them down the road after you get the feedback from your consumers. Kind of the next stop along that journey is when retailer or brands are trying to sell to retailers, and they previously would use lots of samples. Luckily, COVID forced them all to try 3D, and we've got amazing clients like this major children's clothing brand. They've been able to fully replace some of their lines with 3D when they're selling to retailers. And so for every line and season, they're saving about $100,000 in cost, and it equates to about 4.4 tons of carbon that they're saying per brand per season, which is incredible. And so they're expanding this to more, which is great. But then you also have returns. Client like Stod used 3D on their e-com site, and they actually saw returns drop 66% compared to the 2D images. Purses are an amazing use case for AR because the number one reason they are returned is it was bigger or smaller than I thought it was. But if you use augmented reality, I can see that true to size on my desk and be confident in that purchase. Now, again, people kind of think of the carbon waste of, shipping that back to the store, but if an item is damaged, most brands actually burn that product. They can't sell damaged goods. They don't want to throw out damaged goods and have that end up on a secondary market. So not only is it the waste of shipping back, but those goods are literally being burned half the time. And so, if you do have damaged goods, there's a great startup called Arrive platform that is trying to repurpose these and sell them. But just reducing those returns to begin with is a huge carbon reduction. There we go. And of course, everyone is excited about AI. Everyone's talking about it. But 3D models can be used for machine learning inputs. So this is something at VNTANA we're thinking a lot about. We have a huge library of 3D assets that could be used for training data. But it's not just the 3D model. So when we look at 3D assets, we can actually add metadata. So that we have all that product information. So it's like a quick example of the saw, I'm adding MSRP price, the color, the materials it was made out of. But if you have your systems tied together, right? So we're headless, we can tie in with API to the PLM system, understand what inventory is there, what's moving faster. You can continue to add attributes and metadata to this 3D asset throughout the life cycle of that product. So you can think about that 3D models actually getting smarter, and you have more data to feed into a machine learning system to learn from it. So maybe we are adding in the return rate and the reasons for returns or the sales. And so you can actually tie all that data to those 3D assets, feed them into a machine learning model, and actually spit out a better product at the end of the day. So these are some things that we're kind of thinking about and just brainstorming, and just the tip of the iceberg with some of our clients. But the fact that like a 3D model could learn and get smarter, right, as it goes throughout a product life cycle. And then you just have deeper data and more data for 3D. So we have a e-commerce client, Refinery. They added 3D to their e-commerce site, and as everyone's heard a million times, it increases conversion rate, right? 88% of consumers said they really enjoyed the experience. 70% said, it helped them make that purchase decision. But what was really interesting was Refinery tracked the actual, where consumers were looking and interacting with that 3D model. And they found that the majority of consumers were zooming into a totally different part of the products than they thought. So it actually ended up changing their photography, because majority of consumers were doing this really, really close zoom in to see those buttons and that logo. And they didn't have a close-up picture of that before. So in tracking what consumers were interacting with this 3D, it completely changed the photography on their website. And so it becomes super interesting of what else can you track and see consumers, because you couldn't even do that in a store. That would be creepy. You're gonna have sensors and seeing what people are looking at. So it just is super interesting. And of course, they're now using 3D models to auto-generate 2D renders and change those rendering positions based on where consumers are looking. So you kind of can create this interactive feedback loop to continue to tweak and get the exact information to your consumers, when they want it and where they want it. And next, you've got enhanced customer service. So, you can create interactive 3D models. Let's see, I think I have to click this, yeah. You can add hotspots, explain exactly how that product works. This is like a hospital bed I grabbed just as an example, but you can actually show all the different pieces and how, you as a nurse or doctor can use that. But you could also provide this to customer service representatives. So you're calling someone on the phone or you're doing that chat on your website. You could easily send them a link and say, hey, let's walk through this. Because it's really hard over the phone to explain to someone where to put that screw or where that part fits in. And then you could also even use 3D, not just for manuals, but people could practice putting something together. How many people here have put together something from IKEA and you did step 4 wrong, and so you thought you were good, but you got to step 7, and then you couldn't do it, and then you had to take the whole thing apart and start over? Well, if you could actually practice the assembly with 3D assets, you could actually avoid that whole problem, right? And you could provide that better consumer experience for someone. So, car company has been doing this for a while because they realize no one's reading the manual. I think every product that requires assembly should be doing this. And then you also have really increased accessibility. So, of course, talking about like the zooming in of products, people with vision impairment have the ability to zoom in as close as they want to any piece of that product. So they can see every single little detail and part that they want. In addition, for people actually trying to navigate a store, you could create a tactile 3D model to help guide people, or even have assistance with a remote person who's seeing a 3D model of that store and helping guide someone through where they're going. So these have been some really exciting ways that we're seeing 3D being used to just help improve accessibility of that consumer shopping experience. And then you have, this customer lifetime value. How do you improve that? We work with a lot of fashion brands, and one, was creating this super high-end couture, like $25,000 jacket that I would never buy, but celebrities do. But it's designed in a 3D program, and it's a one-of-a-kind, and so they gave that 3D model to the buyer as a gift. A gift with their purchase, which I thought was so interesting, and it was really cool because you're probably not going to wear that jacket all the time, but you now have this digital asset you own that you can share. We also worked with a private car collector, same, had a $25 million car. I didn't know cars could cost that much money. But he invested in creating a 3D model of that car, because if you have a car that expensive, you're also not driving it. It's sitting in your garage and you look at it occasionally, which is, to be honest, again, I don't know why, it's not my thing. But it was really cool because he created this 3D model, and so he could share it with his friends. He'd pop it up on his phone and hold it up in AR and show it in a room like this and talk about this fancy, crazy car. But it just kind of connects that consumer with that product and gives them a way to really share more. And I thought this was a really interesting use case of Forever 21 that created these hats in Roblox that just sold out in Roblox. They sold over 1.5 million. So then they manufactured the hat in real life, and it sold out in real life, which was pretty cool, working backwards from most brands, but it was really smart. And I know there's a lot of things happening right now in Roblox. Are we advertising to kids? Are we not? And yes, we need to figure what that right mix is and how to approach them in these games. But at the end of the day, kids are meeting in games like Roblox. They're not meeting at the mall as much anymore. And so if you're a brand, I think you need a presence there to start building that connection with these young consumers, because when they're 22, they're gonna know the brands that they were around the most, and the most time they're hanging out with people are in these digital worlds and digital games. And so when you can give people digital collectibles, especially that Gen Z, they really value that and appreciate that from you as a brand. And then you also can have predictive learning models. So we talked about having this 3D asset that has metadata, that you're adding metadata to it to understand the product life cycle better, so it's all in one location. Well, then you can start to create some really interesting simulations and digital twins. So you can do predictive maintenance within manufacturing to understand, okay, in this scenario, when is this bearing gonna break down, and how do we fix this before it's too late and we lose a day of manufacturing, which will cost millions of dollars. Or our supply chain, after COVID, a lot of people were we're moving manufacturing from China to Mexico or the US. Okay, well, what does that look like? What happens if there's another pandemic? What are the material changes? You can actually build out these simulation models and run them. I know urban planning and infrastructure management is starting to use 3D for design and to understand different simulations for populations and where they're gonna live. And then you have healthcare and medical research. So, will that knee replacement fit and move correctly? Or is that plastic surgery really gonna look good? That really important things. But from simulation and predictive learning, you can be so much more accurate with 3D and these virtual simulations that you're doing. So kind of in a nutshell, 3D is not just about replacing samples and increasing conversion. If you set up your business to have access to those 3D models from every area of your organization with a scalable IT infrastructure, you can increase speed to market. You can reduce costs in that early design and manufacturing phase. You can significantly reduce your carbon footprint and provide a better consumer experience and actually learn from your consumers in real time to improve what you're showing them. And then you can use ML and training data to then create better products in the future and continue to iterate on that. That can also be used for these simulations and predictive learning models. At VNTANA, we're so excited about just everything that's happening in this space, and we're huge believers in build once, use everywhere. And so making sure people have access within your organization to these 3D assets is so important. I won't say the name, but like we work with a really big company and we were like talking with, Google is now launching 3D in search, and Google's like, we talked to them. They said they don't have 3D models. And I was like, that's funny because we have 1,200 on our platform. Like, who are you talking to, right? And so being able to connect the dots between these different groups in the organization so they all have access to the 3D assets so you can actually start reaping the benefits across all of these different platforms. So yeah, I always talk way faster than I think I'm going to talk. So I'm going to pause and open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. That was so informative and very, very wonderful. Does anybody have any questions for Ashley today? Wonderful.
Okay. Cool.
This was amazing, by the way. Thank you. I feel like in ways it speaks to some of the things I'm trying to do for my employer. What luck have you had in terms of selling this in terms of return on investment? There's so many great categories here that offer return that I haven't even thought about. But have you had any luck quantifying each of those in terms of investment, in terms of internal assets, teams, et cetera, to sell this through to leadership?
Yeah. That's a great question. So we talk, it depends on what your business KPIs are, right? So I was talking with a brand last week, and he was like, look, I get we can save on samples. He was like, for our business, cost savings doesn't move the needle. But if you can show me that you're increasing sales, then I can get budget for this. And I said, okay, so your use case, let's break it down. Let's add 3D to e-commerce. Let's add it and provide your B2B sales team with some 3D assets. And let's document what those KPIs are and get measurement back. Whereas, the children's clothing brand was like, our manufacturer in China just increased prices of our samples by 25%. They were already expensive. The prices increased. This is a priority for our management because all of a sudden we have this cost we didn't know we were going to have. How do we, So anyway, I'd love to chat, and it's like, what is your management trying to solve, and let's solve that problem. Because it's not 3D because it's fun. It's
but it is.
Yeah, I mean it is fun, but like ideally it's solving a problem.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
Hello, my name is Jerome Morrison. I work for a company called Meow Wolf. We build large-scale physical
I love
installations.
Meow Wolf.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love when I don't have to do the explanation. So one of the problems that we're trying to solve right now is how do we take some of our schematics and things that our architects are doing and be able to have like a centralized 3D repository for that. But we've noticed that those models that the architects and schematics are doing are not the same as what our lighting designers and what our sound designers need. For example, like our lighting designer is using software right now called Depends, which is able to actually like look at the materiality of the surfaces of things, and he can plug in the DMX lighting control in order to do all of the show system lighting based off of like those schematic and those kinds of designs. And it's just been, it's a difficult task trying to manage all of the different types of 3D assets that are needed for the different types of software. And so I'm wondering, like, what is is your solution for moving between like BIM models, but more things like that could be in Unreal and Unity, but then also in some of like software like Depends? How does your company like handle all of that different data type?
Yeah, so my background, when we first started, it was like 10 years ago, we were building custom like interactive mixed reality experiences for brands and dealing like with this problem. Like we'd get a 10 gigabyte CAD file from DJI, the drone company, and then we'd get like a 2 gigabyte Nike shoe that was from Moto and like weird. So, we can't solve everything, but we, over the years, started building automated optimization and conversion pipelines. So, what our CMS basically is it's a headless CMS, but we have ability to create different 3D model workflows on the back end. So we have over like 40 flags that you can choose and customize. So we'll automatically optimize that file and give you an optimized FBX, GLB, and USDZ, because then you can pretty much go anywhere, web, Unity, Unreal. But then we have options, because like some people, you want to optimize but preserve UVs and meshes because you want to recolor it somewhere else. Or no, you just want like the smallest possible file, so like automate the texture baking and get it there. So I haven't worked with that lighting design program, so I don't know if that works, but I would love to learn more because that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. Does anybody have a question? Great.
It's just a follow-up question of the previous one. For the retail, this is more an architecture, this is for more retail. For mass volume of products to create 3D models, what's your solution on what kind of software or photogrammetry or any other methods that you use to create the 3D models?
Yeah, so we actually don't create 3D models. So most apparel companies we work with, they design in either Clo or Browseware. And we've got plugins to those so we can upload and convert and do whatever you need. Footwear tends to be Keyshot or Moto. I think Keyshot is easier to use. We also have like a network of 3D scanning partners that we're happy to recommend, and we have a network of like 3D artists we just recommend if you need 3D assets. But we're more like if you needed Vimeo to like upload, embed, and share video, you'd use VNTANA to upload, embed, and share 3D. But we get happy to provide recommendations. So cool, awesome.
Thank you,
Thank you
Ashley
all.
Crowder, for a great presentation.